The wife of a wealthy conglomerate is murdered. The suspect is quickly brought to trial. The chairman's mistress watches the woman being led away with cold, sharp eyes, while the chairman's daughter walks out of the courtroom in a daze. She knows that her mother's death is not as simple as it seems. Years pass, and Miss Seo-ki has grown up and returned to uncover the truth about her mother's murder. Seo-ki alone must confront the power of an entire family filled with greed and ruthlessness. The first person to be targeted is the chairman's mistress. After Seo-ki's mother passed away, the chairman's mistress officially became his wife. She had just woken up from a night of revelry with a young man. However, her joy quickly vanished when she discovered a tiny camera had recorded everything. Instead of panicking, Mrs. Mo merely smiled calmly. She leisurely picked up her phone and made a call. Less than 10 minutes later, a group of men in black suits entered with expressionless faces. Before the young man could understand what was happening, he was forced to his knees. He desperately begged Mrs. Mo for forgiveness. Mrs. Mo didn't even glance at her lover. She coldly ordered her subordinates to deal with him. This is how the super-rich cover up their heinous and disgusting acts. In another corner of the city, Won-soo, the young master of the MC group, was speeding. When the police stopped his car, Won-soo showed no fear. He just sat in the car with his eyes closed, as if nothing outside concerned him. A few minutes later, a luxurious black car appeared. Someone got out and showed the police officer their phone. As a result, instead of being handcuffed, the young man was escorted away in an ambulance. The ambulance even had its emergency lights on. Meanwhile, the second son of the MC group was facing an awkward situation. During an interview, the female reporter deliberately flaunted her alluring figure. While talking to Won-jun, she ran her hand through her hair, her gaze incredibly seductive. Won-jun, being straightforward, coldly told her to stop her cheap flirting. Embarrassed, the reporter turned to accuse Won-jun of harassment. Just then, team leader Lee appeared and scolded her. The MC group also had a third son, named Seo-jin. Contrary to his fair and adorable face, Seo-jin was just as spoiled as his brothers. To avoid being disturbed, Seo-jin rented an entire row of computers in an internet cafe to play games alone. Behind the arrogance of these young masters lay an even more terrifying force, a mysterious and powerful organization called TOP. This organization brought together top prosecutors, hackers, and special forces soldiers. Their mission was to wipe out all scandals and wrongdoings within the tycoon family. One day, the founder of the MC group suddenly fell ill and was in critical condition. While everyone in the group panicked, the chairman's son secretly rejoiced, as supreme power within the family was about to fall into his hands. However, what the old man mentioned in his dying moments wasn't his son, but his granddaughter, who had left Korea many years ago. The grandfather had always longed to see Seo-ki again. Chairman Mo's subordinates immediately took on the task of concealing this information so that Seo-ki wouldn't be able to return in time to claim the inheritance. However, a stranger sent Seo-ki a message that her grandfather was in critical condition. Without hesitation, Seo-ki immediately packed her bags and booked a flight back to Korea. Seo-ki knew that someone from the family would surely be waiting for her at the airport. With her cleverness, Seo-ki hired a body double to distract the bodyguards, while she quietly slipped out through another door and sped off in her convertible to the hospital. Along the way, Seo-ki was inadvertently noticed by a middle-aged man. Seeing that the driver was a woman, he deliberately overtook her and braked sharply right in front of Seo-ki's car. Seo-ki couldn't avoid him and crashed into the back of his car. Immediately, the man got out of his car and feigned injury, leading to a dispute at the police station. To ensure his victory, the man even hired a lawyer. At this point, Seo-ki unexpectedly received a video recording of the entire collision. In front of the police and the lawyer, she calmly presented the clip as evidence. The two police officers were astonished after watching it. Not wanting to prolong the matter, Seo-ki immediately stood up and left. However, as soon as Seo-ki stepped out of the police station, she was stopped by a group of Afin people. Leading the group was Mrs. Han, the powerful woman in Seo-ki's family. From afar, young lawyer Yoon-do witnessed the entire incident. He rushed over to explain everything and protect Seo-ki. Seo-ki sensed Yoon-do's sincerity, so she pulled him away. After 15 years of separation, Seo-ki finally set foot in her old home. However, instead of joyfully welcoming her, her relatives looked at her with astonishment, mixed with hatred. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Seo-ki maintained the confidence and strength of a wealthy heiress. Meanwhile, on the rooftop of the company, a middle-aged man stood at the edge of the terrace. His daughter had died suddenly while working overtime, yet the company was trying to evade responsibility and refused to compensate her. Having exhausted all other options, he could only use his own life to seek justice for his daughter. Upon receiving the news, Mrs. Han rushed to the scene. Before the crowd, Mrs. Han announced that the company would provide compensation. She also promised to send the man's youngest son abroad for his studies. Hearing this, the man believed it to be true. But as soon as he entered, the bodyguards immediately rushed forward to restrain him. They dragged him away like a criminal. This scene was inadvertently witnessed by Seo-ki. Overwhelmed with anger, she headed straight for the gate, ignoring the guards' attempts to stop her. To everyone's astonishment, she climbed into a motorcycle and started the engine. The car suddenly crashed violently into the vehicle, escorting the unfortunate man. Before they could understand what was happening, Seo-ki opened the door and stepped out. She declared that the victim's family would receive compensation. Seo-ki had a lot of money and had been drinking. Seo-ki was even willing to accept being convicted of hit and run if it was necessary for justice to be served. Before leaving the scene, Seo-ki turned to Yoon-do and ordered him to handle all the remaining procedures. Everyone present couldn't believe what had just happened. Then, Seo-ki handcuffed herself and walked into the police station. She repeatedly insisted that she had been drinking while driving. Meanwhile, the man who had lost his child, sat silently beside her, staring at Seo-ki with astonishment. At that moment, Seo-ki turned to Yoon-do and asked about the amount of money needed to raise a child and send it abroad for education. The police officer handling the case said that the man actually had 2 children, so 150 million won would definitely not be enough. Seo-ki merely raised her eyebrows slightly upon hearing this. She decided to add a 0 to the compensation amount. The impoverished man was astonished, thinking he had misheard. Not stopping there, Seo-ki immediately made a phone call, demanding that the company transfer 1 billion won. Seo-ki warned that if they didn't, she would reveal her true identity to the press. Less than a few minutes later, the man's phone rang with a notification that his account had received 1 billion won. He turned to look at Seo-ki with a mixture of gratitude and gwar. Shock, Seo-ki simply told him to use the money to raise their 2 children. Well, then she put on her sunglasses and walked out of the police station with a proud and powerful demeanor. At this moment, Mrs. Han was furious. Mrs. Han couldn't let Seo-ki do whatever Seo-ki wanted, so she immediately thought of a way to control Seo-ki. Of course, the person chosen to do that was none other than Yoon-do. Mrs. Han persuaded Yoon-do to join the MC group under the pretext of assisting with work, but in reality, it was to supervise Seo-ki full-time. To help Yoon-do complete his task, Mrs. Han even prepared 3 suitcases in the trunk of his car. The first suitcase contained money for daily expenses, and the other 2 were for emergencies. Before leaving, Mrs. Han gave Yoon-do a car key. From that moment, Yoon-do officially became an insider at the MC group. At the same time, Seo-ki's stepmother knew that Seo-ki was about to return. She feared that Seo-ki would seize the inheritance, so she immediately tested the waters by organizing a blind date. The stepmother thought that with Seo-ki's arrogant personality, she would surely strongly object. But unexpectedly, Seo-ki nodded in agreement without hesitation. In fact, Seo-ki had thoroughly researched the person she was about to meet. It turned out that the man was the son of the prosecutor who had handled the murder case of Seo-ki's mother years ago. What was supposed to be a chance to get acquainted quickly turned into a heated argument. As soon as they sat down, Seo-ki bluntly mocked him, causing the other man to leave in anger. The next day, Seo-ki and Yoon-do visited her mother's grave. As they were about to leave the cemetery, a black car suddenly blocked their way. Several men in sharp suits got out. They identified themselves as prosecutors and forced the 2 to stop for inspection. Before Seo-ki could react, they immediately searched her handbag. Unexpectedly, they found a package of drugs inside. Before she could understand what was happening, Seo-ki was taken to the interrogation room. The man sitting opposite Seo-ki was the same man she had humiliated during the blind date. He looked at her with a provocative gaze, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Seo-ki vehemently denied the prosecutor's accusations. The man didn't argue, but immediately signed the arrest warrant. But Seo-ki wasn't one to be easily subdued. As soon as she was thrown into her cell, Seo-ki began to act. Her screams echoed throughout the cell block, startling everyone. Seeing the meager meal before her, Seo-ki became furious. She threw her spoon to the ground and slammed the iron door. Seo-ki loudly demanded a decent meal. Just a few minutes later, a delicious and satisfying meal was brought to her. Seo-ki's fellow prisoners were astonished. They had only ever eaten meager meals, and now they were treated to such a delicious meal, which made them extremely grateful. From then on, they regarded Seo-ki as their leader. However, behind this was a meticulously planned conspiracy by her wicked stepmother. During a community service session, a female prisoner, feeling tired, sat down to rest for a while. But shortly after, she was kicked to the ground and insulted for being lazy by another female prisoner. Seo-ki witnessed this and felt angry. Unable to tolerate the strong bullying the weak, Seo-ki immediately rushed forward and delivered a precise kick, sending her to the ground. When the other prisoner tried to retaliate, Seo-ki quickly grabbed her collar and warned her. However, as soon as she was released, the other female prisoner immediately lunged at Seo-ki from behind. Seo-ki spun around, delivered a powerful punch, and then headbutted her, sending her tumbling. Not stopping there, Seo-ki pinned her down against the wire mesh. The female prisoner, in pain, could only tremble and beg for mercy. Fortunately, at that moment, the guard entered, and Seo-ki slowly released her and stood up. Seo-ki's expression was calm, as if nothing had happened. While the other female prisoner was terrified, her face pale, she bowed her head, not daring to look directly into Seo-ki's eyes. Everyone present understood that within the 4 walls of the prison, only one person held power, and that person was Seo-ki, the beautiful yet strong-willed daughter of a wealthy tycoon. After her arrest, Seo-ki refused to passively accept her sentence. When lawyer Yoon-do visited, Seo-ki frankly demanded that he find the person who had framed her. Yoon-do understood that if he didn't help Seo-ki escape punishment, she would never have a chance to leave prison. Thanks to his close relationship with the police, Yoon-do began investigating based on the smallest clues. After many days of investigation, Yoon-do discovered that a female employee who had worked at the shopping mall had secretly placed drugs in Seo-ki's handbag. Not stopping there, Yoon-do also found a witness who had seen the entire incident firsthand. Yoon-do also secretly recorded the witness's testimony. Later, Yoon-do took the recording to the prosecutor, who had signed the arrest warrant for Seo-ki. When the recording was played, the prosecutor's expression immediately changed. The entire conspiracy was exposed, forcing the prosecutor to bow his head and admit his mistake. Thanks to the solid evidence, Seo-ki was declared innocent and quickly released. After leaving prison, Seo-ki went to the hospital to visit his grandfather, who was in a coma. Seo-ki and Yoon-do discussed acquiring shares in the corporation. Currently, the corporation is facing difficulties due to a lack of capital, and projects are stalled. Seo-ki sought out a woman nicknamed Milk Witch, a famous capitalist in the financial world. difficult. She is known for her ruthless personality and only cares about profit. Those who have worked with her understand that breaking a promise once will cost them dearly. When she heard Sok-hee say that she wanted to confront her own father, Milk Witch was surprised. She directly asked if Sok-hee had a chance of winning. Sok-hee calmly replied that her true goal wasn't power, but finding the person who had harmed her mother. Sok-hee believed that only with enough money and power could she achieve that. Hearing this, Milk Witch merely smiled and remarked that Sok-hee resembled her grandfather. Not long after, Milk Witch agreed to provide Sok-hee with a huge sum of money. Milk Witch saw in Sok-hee courage, honesty, and strength of character, qualities she rarely saw in young people in the upper class. Immediately afterward, Milk Witch's assistant hurriedly brought the contract to the hospital to announce the good news to Sok-hee's grandfather. Upon receiving the news, the butler immediately locked the room door. Meanwhile, at the corporation headquarters, Chairman Mo was performing a memorial service for his deceased mother. After the ceremony, he took the opportunity to announce to all shareholders that he had officially taken over the MC Group. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until Sok-hee's grandfather unexpectedly appeared. The man who had been in a coma for many years now appeared, astonishing everyone in the hall. Grandfather, in a wheelchair, calmly entered and surveyed the room. His gaze settled on Sok-hee, his beloved granddaughter. After a slight nod, he announced to everyone that he would bequeath all of the MC Group's assets to Sok-hee. This statement stunned the entire hall for 5 seconds. Mrs. Han was motionless, while the shareholders exchanged disbelieving glances. But the shock didn't end there. Sok-hee's grandfather continued by saying that in the event of Sok-hee's death in an accident, all of the assets would be donated to society. Everyone exchanged worried glances, while Sok-hee understood that from this moment on, the real power struggle had only just begun. That year, when her grandfather's health began to decline, he believed that only Sok-hee had the ability to take over the MC Group. He saw her as intelligent, straightforward, and far-sighted. He also gave Mrs. Han, his loyal assistant of many years, a higher position, hoping she could guide Sok-hee through the difficult initial period. However, he never imagined that misplaced trust would lead to tragedy. Mrs. Han's ambition was greater than anyone could imagine. Outwardly, she appeared gentle and loyal, but no one knew that she and her son were secretly manipulating power. Two people secretly orchestrated a traffic accident to eliminate Sok-hee's grandfather. As a result, he fell into a deep coma for many years, jeopardizing the corporation's future. Sok-hee's grandfather unexpectedly woke up, shaking the entire corporation. Everyone believed that Sok-hee's time had finally come, and she would reclaim what belonged to her. However, no one suspected that during Sok-hee's grandfather's absence, Mrs. Han and Sok-hee's stepmother had been secretly consolidating power. At the luxurious Mo family mansion, the stepmother sat leaning back in her chair, a glass of shimmering red wine in her hand. She enjoyed the violin music in the artistic setting, but a closer look revealed the performer standing barefoot on the cold stone, her feet bruised and trembling. Sok-hee happened to pass by and was immediately stunned by the sight. Anger surged within her. Sok-hee couldn't understand why anyone could call that art. She walked straight into the room and demanded the performance stop. However, the female artist looked at Sok-hee with a desperate, embarrassed expression. Mrs. Mo calmly set down her glass of wine. She stated that stopping the performance midway was a breach of contract, and therefore the artist would not receive her payment that day. The artist could only lower her head and glance at Sok-hee with resentment. She quickly left in silence. Now, only the two women remained in the room. Mrs. Mo looked at her husband's stepson with contempt. She sarcastically remarked that Sok-hee understood nothing about art. Moreover, because of Sok-hee's interference, someone else had lost $5,000 on the performance. Sok-hee stared back at Mrs. Mo with anger and disdain. To Sok-hee, this art was nothing more than a form of abuse. She said that only heartless people could call the suffering of others beautiful. Upon hearing those words, the smile on Mrs. Mo's lips vanished. Mrs. Mo approached Sok-hee and slapped her hard. The sound of the slap echoed throughout the large space. Sok-hee's cheek turned red, but instead of backing down, Sok-hee pushed her stepmother to the floor. Just then, the door opened, and the sight before him stunned Chairman Mo. His new wife lay on the floor, while his daughter stood upright with a defiant look in her eyes. The stepmother immediately burst into tears, playing the victim. In an instant, Sok-hee understood that she had fallen into her stepmother's trap. Chairman Mo still didn't fully understand the situation, so he angrily demanded that his daughter apologize to her stepmother. But Sok-hee wouldn't admit fault when she was innocent. Her stubbornness only made Chairman Mo lose control. In his anger, he hurled harsh words at Sok-hee. He said she shouldn't have been born. Those words shattered Sok-hee's heart. She looked at the father she once loved with disappointment and pain. She turned her back and walked out of the magnificent but cold mansion. Afterward, Sok-hee quickly put her revenge plan into action. Mrs. Han told Sok-hee the name of the nanny who was accused of murdering her mother years ago. The nanny was currently imprisoned. Next, Sok-hee called Yundo to ask him to investigate. Upon hearing the news, Yundo couldn't remain calm because that nanny was his mother. That year, Mrs. Han threatened Yundo's mother that if she didn't confess, her son would disappear from the world. With no other choice, Yundo's mother complied. For 15 years, Yundo's mother refused to see her son whenever he visited her in prison. But this time, as the lawyer for the MC Group, Yundo finally met his mother. Realizing his attempts at persuasion were ineffective, Yundo decided to take Sok-hee to prison so she could find the answer herself. Sure enough, Yundo's mother finally told the young lady the truth. She hadn't murdered Sok-hee's mother. The late madam had already passed away before she entered the room. When Sok-hee emerged from prison, Yundo said that the nanny couldn't possibly have murdered anyone. She was a nanny caring for the family, so there was no reason reason for her to do such a sudden thing. However, Yoondo's overly dramatic reaction aroused Soki's suspicion. Therefore, Soki questioned Yoondo about his relationship with the nanny. Unable to hide it any longer, Yoondo frankly shared that everything was orchestrated by Mrs. Han. This seemed to remind Soki of something. That year, Seokhee's mother was the eldest daughter-in-law of a top South Korean conglomerate. Although she had been framed, not even a report was filed. Everyone could see there was some kind of conspiracy hidden behind this story. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So soon Soki and Yoondo collaborated. However, Soki never expected that a glass of fruit juice at breakfast would cause such a big problem. After breakfast at home, Soki drove to the corporation. But unexpectedly, on the way, Soki was stopped by the police for a breathalyzer test. Even more surprisingly, the police discovered that Soki had alcohol in her system. Immediately, Soki realized that she had been framed. At the same time, everyone was anxiously awaiting Soki's appearance at the shareholders' meeting. However, information quickly spread online that the CEO's daughter had driven while drunk. Everyone was extremely shocked and worried by this news. Meanwhile, Seokee was taken to the police station. She felt very confused because she clearly hadn't drunk a single drop of alcohol. Suddenly, she remembered the glass of juice she had drunk that morning. In an instant, she understood the problem. It turned out, Seokee suffered from a condition called spontaneous alcohol fermentation. She only needed to consume sugar for her stomach to ferment it. All of this was caused by her stepmother. Upon hearing the news, Seokee's grandfather went to see Chairman Mo. He asked his son to make Seokee the representative director. However, Chairman Mo said that this matter had to be decided by the board of directors. Clearly, he was just making an excuse to avoid fulfilling the request. The grandfather, angered, left. Meanwhile, the son, only concerned with his own interests, decided to send his father to his grave. Mrs. Han devised a plan to deal with the situation. Mrs. Han also met with Seokee and bluntly told her that her grandfather didn't have much time left and that Seokee's current wishes would put him in a difficult position. However, Seokee said that as long as the corporation belonged to her, it didn't matter whether her grandfather passed away or not. After all, her grandfather was old, and his death was inevitable. Seokee thought the corporation would quickly become hers, but she didn't realize she had fallen into someone's trap. Seokee's grandfather invited several important shareholders to his house. He wanted to help Seokee run for the CEO position. Seeing everything going so smoothly, Seokee felt somewhat relieved. Suddenly, her grandfather received a phone call from Mrs. Han. Immediately after the call ended, his health suddenly deteriorated, and he passed away on the spot. All of this was caused by Mrs. Han. Mrs. Han met with Seokee's grandfather's doctor. From the doctor, Mrs. Han knew that Seokee's grandfather had to avoid many foods, especially dried almonds, because they would increase pressure on his heart. Furthermore, the audio recording playing only agitated him, resulting in his sudden death. To avoid affecting the company's stock, they held a small family funeral. The only person who loved Seokee had left her. Now Seokee was left alone to fight. This devastated Seokee. She was still reassured because she held the largest number of shares in the company. But Seokee didn't expect Mrs. Han to force her to sign the share transfer agreement. At this point, Seokee was furious and only wanted to know who had harmed her grandfather. If the person told her the truth, she would sign. Mrs. Han simply told Seokee that all she needed to do was be a pampered young lady who could spend money freely. Seokee, disgusted, took a candy from the table and put it in her mouth. She calmly walked around the room as if deep in thought. However, Mrs. Han immediately realized something was wrong, so she ordered her bodyguard to check Seokee's phone. It turned out Seokee had secretly used her phone to record a conversation. After the phone was thrown into a glass of water, Mrs. Han blamed Seokee for her grandfather's death. She then played the recording on Seokee's phone. Finally, Seokee had no choice but to sign the contract. When she went outside, Seokee pulled out a voice recorder she had secretly hidden on her person. Seokee secretly vowed to avenge her grandfather. The fish raised in this wealthy family lived a much better life than many others. Its food was all high-end. Furthermore, it also has 2 female attendants who take care of it every day. However, because its owner had angered a wealthy young lady, its life ended tragically. It turned out that when Seokee left the room, she had thrown the chewing gum she was using into the fish tank. Mrs. Mo wept upon seeing the dead fish. She decided to hold a grand funeral for it, attended by high-ranking social figures. To better entertain the guests, Mrs. Mo even hired a top chef. Everyone held white chrysanthemums, arranged in 2 rows. After a moment of mourning for the fish, they successively released the white chrysanthemums into the water. Seokee watched this scene from upstairs, feeling extremely uneasy. A fish's funeral was far more elaborate than her grandfather's. Immediately afterward, Seokee appeared in a striking red dress, holding a red rose, and approached the fish's portrait. Seokee said goodbye to the fish, and then threw the rose into the lake. Immediately afterwards, Seokee calmly left. Chairman Mo observed everything from afar. He could no longer tolerate his daughter's capricious behavior. He feared that one day he would lose all his power, so he sought out Mrs. Han. The two quickly reached a final decision, to ask the family members to sign a document relinquishing their shares. After Seokee knew of this through Yoondo, she decided to use this opportunity to create internal conflict within the family. Sure enough, when this news was revealed, factions began to form within the corporation. First, Chairman Mo's subordinates approached Nari, the mother of the 3rd son. They directly presented the documents for a 20,000 square meter plot of land. The condition was that Nari transfer her son's shares to the 2nd son. However, Nari unexpectedly refused the offer. It turned out that Seokee had anticipated her father's plan and had met with Nari beforehand, advising Nari not to sign the contract. Otherwise, Nari would be immediately immediately expelled from the family. When the first target failed, Chairman Mo's subordinates moved on to the next target, the second son's wife. This time, they generously offered a high-value divorce contract. However, she also directly refused the offer. Not only that, she also expressed her deep love for her husband. Of course, this was influenced by So-ki. During their conversation, she reminded her sister-in-law that this wasn't the right time for a divorce. Waiting until her husband became the heir would bring much greater value. Meanwhile, the eldest son, Won-soo, continued pursuing his dream of becoming a director. Won-soo urgently needed money to raise capital for his own company, so he couldn't accept giving up his shares. Knowing the plan had failed, Mrs. Han suspected Yoon-do. Initially, Yoon-do was a little worried. However, So-ki told him to give the documents to Mrs. Han, which would resolve his suspicions. Unexpectedly, Mrs. Han leaked information to the media that Nari was pregnant before marriage and was hiding a son over 10 years old. Nari angrily confronted Mrs. Han, but Mrs. Han had already forged a paternity test result. Nari was devastated. After knowing this, So-ki publicly announced on live news that the child's father was the chairman of the MC group. Furthermore, So-ki revealed that Nari was an actress by profession. The family feud within the upper class has erupted once again, and the most suspicious person in this case can only be the newly joined member of the organization, Yoon-do. The efficiency of the top investigation team is unquestionable. It didn't take long for them to uncover Yoon-do's true identity. The person named Yoon-do turned out to have died 15 years ago in an accident. Upon knowing this, Mrs. Han immediately summoned Yoon-do for questioning. Unexpectedly, Yoon-do responded very well. Yoon-do asserted that he had no memory of the accident. When he woke up, Yoon-do was in his adoptive father's house. Because of the sudden loss of his biological son, the father treated Yoon-do as his own son, and they lived together as a family. Yoon-do also cleverly expressed his curiosity about his childhood identity. To continue the investigation, Mrs. Han assigned Yoon-do a new mission to prevent the National Assembly's succession announcement to him. The other members were all wide-eyed with astonishment, as they hadn't expected Mrs. Han to entrust such an important task to a newcomer like Yoon-do. Yoon-do was also surprised, but he promised to complete the task. Before Yoon-do left, Mrs. Han even offered him access to the main computer. Everyone sensed that Mrs. Han was trying to probe Yoon-do. However, Yoon-do was completely oblivious. He seized the opportunity to sit at the main computer and search for information about his mother's past case. Meanwhile, Mrs. Han approached Nari, hoping she would sign a share transfer agreement. However, Nari valued money above all else, so she wasn't easily swayed. When negotiations failed, Mrs. Han resorted to threatening Nari. Miss Han mentioned that Nari had used illegal anti-aging treatments. Surprisingly, this didn't put any pressure on Nari. Nari believed that Miss Han wouldn't be able to expose her secret, because if it were revealed, she would publicly announce that the chairman of the MC group had an illegitimate child. At that point, both sides would suffer losses, and the group's stock would plummet. Naturally, the reputation of the wealthy family would also be affected. Clearly, the negotiation had failed, but Nari had challenged the wrong person. Because Miss Han wasn't easily intimidated, Miss Han quickly revealed Nari's secret to the reporters. No news outlet could ignore such sensational news. With the support of the corporation, news about Nari exploded across social media. The consequences for this woman would be the loss of her career and the destruction of her reputation. However, the one most hurt would be Nari's son. Because of the adult's problems, the boy didn't dare go to school or meet his friends. So-ki always cherished her half-brother. Seeing So-jin hurt, So-ki devised a plan. On a leading Korean news channel, So-ki's image was broadcast live. So-ki exposed the chairman of the MC group for having an illegitimate child, and the mother of the child was none other than actress Nari. This news immediately became a hot topic. Top's office was thrown into chaos. Mrs. Han ordered her subordinates to pressure the television station. First, she demanded that they not air any more news related to this matter. Otherwise, the corporation would immediately stop its advertising cooperation with them. Secondly, Yoon-do was instructed not to leave So-ki's side for the next 24 hours. Meanwhile, Mrs. Han held a press conference with reporters. The press conference was brief, but the main character was Won-jun. Won-jun revealed an even more shocking piece of news to the reporters. He was the biological father of Nari's son. The reporters immediately began discussing it. Furthermore, once the succession was finalized, Won-jun would inherit the corporation's assets. This meant Won-jun would have to pay a huge amount of tax to the government. To minimize this enormous tax burden, Won-jun needed the support of members of parliament on his side. To win over these members, Yoon-do resorted to underhanded tactics. He arranged for the members of parliament to have fun at bars with beautiful women. He also gathered information about the negative aspects of their families. Afterward, a meeting was held. Miss Han showed a cheerful video of the commissioners and gifted each of them a supercar. Ultimately, Miss Han successfully bribed these members of parliament, further solidifying Chairman Mo's power. Afterward, Chairman Mo hosted a party and invited the members of Top to dine with his family at his villa. Such a joyous occasion wouldn't be complete without So-ki. Just as everyone was raising their glasses, So-ki unexpectedly appeared. And even more surprisingly, So-ki brought another person with him. Nari entered. Much to everyone's astonishment, it turned out So-ki wanted Nari to move into the house so she could easily deal with her wicked stepmother. Chairman Mo called Nari to another room and told her to leave quickly. Nari began to use her acting skills. Her crying and lamenting about her pitiful situation made him feel helpless. Chairman Mo, outwardly strong, was actually indecisive. Unsure how to handle the situation, he sought advice from Mrs. Han. Mrs. Han gave a surprising answer. Let Nari stay. Meanwhile, So-ki advised Nari to publish an autobiography to expose the family's crimes. Mrs. Han wanted to ensure that internal information information wouldn't leak out, so she proactively reassured Nari by allowing Nari to stay in the house. He's plan succeeded as expected. Early the next morning, Nari emerged from Chairman Mo's room wearing a seductive nightgown. Nari deliberately let Mrs. Mo see her. Mrs. Mo angrily questioned why Nari dared to enter the chairman's room. However, Nari said that Mrs. Mo and her husband no longer slept together, so why should she care who her husband slept with? This sarcastic remark angered Mrs. Mo so much that she clutched her chest. But things didn't stop there. Today was the wedding anniversary of the chairman and his wife. As expected, Nari continued to provoke Mrs. Mo. Nari said that Mrs. Mo was old, while Nari was young and still capable of bearing children. Hearing this, Mrs. Mo was furious but couldn't retort. Meanwhile, Won-soo knew that his shareholding had dropped from 30% to 15%. Not only that, Won-soo also faced toward provocation from his younger brother. However, wanting to protect his remaining shares, Won-soo had to choose to endure it. Afterwards, Won-soo went to see Mrs. Han to negotiate and threaten her. Currently, Mrs. Han's power was no longer as strong as before. It seems there was some kind of prior agreement between them, and Mrs. Han was the one who violated it. However, Mrs. Han had also prepared for this situation. After a phone call, Mrs. Han ordered Yoon-do to investigate Nari's relationships. Mrs. Han asked Yoon-do to investigate whether Nari and Won-soo had any kind of relationship. Sure enough, Yoon-do discovered a secret relationship between them. Nari's best friend revealed that Nari and Won-soo were once lovers. Not only that, there was also a video recording of intimate moments between the two. That same evening, the two were invited to a restaurant to talk. However, before they could say anything, Mrs. Han showed them the video and threatened them to leave Korea immediately. Mrs. Han also said they should forget about the 30% share in exchange for her keeping their secret. Mrs. Han was truly a cunning and devious person. Won-soo tried to remain calm, even mocking Mrs. Han, but with such clear evidence, Won-soo and his former lover didn't know what to do to cope. Meanwhile, Mrs. Han had also approached Won-jun. Mrs. Han directly stated that Won-jun was a member of the GLBT community. Won-jun neither denied nor admitted it. Since their marriage, Won-jun and his wife had slept separately. Therefore, Won-jun's wife had long intended to divorce him. However, because Won-jun was the chosen heir, she persevered until now, hoping to receive more assets, but her husband wouldn't allow her to easily achieve that goal. For that reason, Won-jun asked Mrs. Han to handle the matter. Won-jun intended to take advantage of the situation to benefit himself. Won-jun hired a chef to teach his wife how to cook, hoping to win her affection. Their intimate moments were photographed without her knowledge. Today, they are using this picture to blackmail Soo-jin. Facing questioning from her family, Soo-jin bursts into tears. Chairman Mo even criticizes Soo-jin, calling her a disgrace to the family. Hearing this, Soo-jin emphasizes that since their marriage, they have never truly been a couple. They only criticize the woman's duties, but what about the man's? At this point, Soo-jin decides to reveal the whole truth. She and her husband have been married for 6 years, but have never slept together. Therefore, Soo-jin cannot have children. So-ki, unable to restrain herself any longer, speaks up. So-ki criticizes Won-jun for not reflecting on himself, but instead blaming his wife. So-ki asks Won-jun if he feels ashamed. Before Won-jun could retort, Mrs. Han spoke up on his behalf. Mrs. Han said that if So-ki said that, then everyone could have an affair. So-ki calmly replied that adultery was a family tradition. From his grandfather to his father, then his older brother, and even his stepmother, they all had affairs, yet they dared to lecture others. His stepmother was startled and immediately scolded So-ki. At this point, Chairman Mo gave Soo-jin 2 choices. Either she would divorce and leave the house without receiving any money, or she would be permanently confined there. Soo-jin, who had suffered so much, couldn't bear it any longer, so she decided to divorce without hesitation. Afterward, So-ki went to comfort Soo-jin. So-ki also gave Soo-jin a necklace and asked her to keep it safe. Furthermore, So-ki hoped that her sister-in-law would keep in touch with her in the future. While Soo-jin was facing bullying from her family members, only So-ki spoke up for her. Therefore, Soo-jin agreed to So-ki's request. After a night of reflection, So-ki decided to help Soo-jin get back the compensation money that rightfully belonged to her. Soo-jin was still a virgin at this point, so So-ki took her to the hospital for a checkup and clarification. Not only that, So-ki also brought a photo of Won-jun with another girl and went to see Mrs. Han. Then So-ki demanded that their family compensate Soo-jin. There, Soo-jin confidently presented a certificate proving that she was still a virgin. Everyone was puzzled because they thought Soo-jin had an affair with the chef. It turned out that Soo-jin had only been unfaithful in her thoughts. Thanks to growing up in an educated family, Soo-jin knew how to protect himself. As a result, Soo-jin successfully received the compensation money. After a long investigation, Yoon-do found journalist Kim. Journalist Kim agreed to help this determined young man. Thus, the two collaborated to find the truth. When Yoon-do told So-ki about this, So-ki also shared the progress of her investigation. So-ki hired a private investigator to investigate her brother's lover. Unexpectedly, So-ki discovered that Won-jun was a member of the LGBT community. Returning to the moment when Mrs. Han came to find Won-jun to confirm whether he was LGBT, Won-jun still tried to cover it up by asking Mrs. Han if she had a picture of his lover. After that, Mrs. Han showed him a picture of Won-jun disguised as a woman. Nevertheless, Mrs. Han agreed to help Won-jun cover up everything. Meanwhile, journalist Kim contacted Yoon-do. He revealed that 15 years ago, after So-ki's mother passed away, Mrs. Han deleted the surveillance video from that day. The housekeeper then secretly called journalist Kim to inform him of the incident, and he wrote an article about it. Unfortunately, the article was immediately removed upon publication, and journalist Kim was fired. Afterward, journalist Kim showed everyone a video. The video showed images of all the family members, including the chairman, his wife, the eldest son, the second son, and Mrs. Han. In other words, everyone could be a suspect. To find the culprit, it was necessary to know the specific time So-Ki's mother was murdered. From there, they could search for those who were present at that time. They were the prime suspects. Unfortunately, the time of So-Ki's mother's death was only recorded in the case file. However, this file was sealed by Mrs. Han, and they don't know where it's currently stored. Journalist Kim suggested they could find clues from the judge who handled the case that year, but that person has been missing for many years. However, Yoon-do easily found the judge's address with the help of his police friend. So-Ki believes her mother discovered Won-jun was LGBT, and this led to her mother's death. Back home, So-Ki continues to question Won-jun about his secret. However, Won-jun remains calm and doesn't reveal any weaknesses. Meanwhile, Mrs. Han has gone to see Chairman Mo to quickly arrange for Won-jun to inherit the shares. She must have feared that Chairman Mo would change his mind after knowing her son's secret. So-Ki's mother was a famous painter when she was alive, so Mrs. Mo wanted to claim her mother's legacy for herself. However, Mrs. Han warned Mrs. Mo against doing so, because with So-Ki's intelligence, she would definitely discover the clues. If that happened, everything would be exposed. Meanwhile, So-Ki discovered a cross-dressing person she found familiar. It turned out that So-Ki had previously found the person who planned the art exhibition that year. This person was quite close to So-Ki's mother and had provided So-Ki with a picture of Won-jun cross-dressing. So-Ki felt increasingly suspicious of Won-jun. The other person said that recently, many paintings with a similar style to So-Ki's mother had appeared on the market. So-Ki immediately felt something was very strange, so she drove to her stepmother's gallery. Sure enough, So-Ki discovered that her biological mother's painting had become her stepmother's work. Thinking of this, So-Ki angrily threw the artwork to the ground. Top's office received the news and immediately sent someone over. Yoon-do pulled So-Ki away from the scene. With this incident of art theft, it's possible that Mrs. Mo is the culprit behind So-Ki's mother's death. On her stepmother's birthday, the whole family held an intimate gathering. People from the upper class sent valuable gifts. Among them was a very special gift, a stack of photos. When Mrs. Mo saw the photos, she panicked for 5 seconds. She never expected them to be pictures of her second son dressed as a woman. Chairman Mo, sitting beside her, noticed his wife's strange expression and snatched the photos away. At that moment, Chairman Mo saw a beautiful girl with his son's face, which enraged him to the point of madness. Chairman Mo couldn't believe his son was LGBT. He then questioned Won-jun, hoping he would deny it, but knowing the secret couldn't be kept any longer, Won-jun confessed. Hearing this, the father angrily chased his son out and then left himself. In fact, Mrs. Mo had long realized her son had a problem, but even with Won-jun's different sexual orientation, he was still the son she loved most. Therefore, Mrs. Mo would still find a way for Won-jun to become the heir to the MC group. Mrs. Han warned Won-jun not to act rashly, otherwise he wouldn't even be able to keep 15% of the shares. Of course, Mrs. Han was also more wary of Won-soo and So-Ki. As for Won-jun, he successfully signed a contract with an important foreign company. It turned out that the chairman of the partner company was also gay. Because the two had many things in common, they easily talked. Miss Han recognized Won-jun as a strong candidate for the chairmanship. However, after knowing about Won-jun's homosexuality, Chairman Mo wanted to change the air. Miss Han expressed her opinion that sexual orientation does not affect the company's business operations. At the same time, Top would be responsible for covering up the issue. Then Miss Han summoned everyone to brainstorm solutions. Yoon-do suggested using this situation to tap into a new market. Regarding preventing Won-jun's cross-dressing image from being exposed, Yoon-do suggested they produce a film about gay people, then have Won-jun appear in disguise as a woman. Therefore, if those photos were to leak out later, Won-jun wearing women's clothes wouldn't be a big problem. Mrs. Han was very pleased with Yoon-do's idea. On the other hand, the butler from that year also tried to escape the surveillance of the Top organization. The butler went to Yoon-do's father's barbecue restaurant to wait to meet Yoon-do. Unexpectedly, for many years, Butler Jung had been secretly searching for the judge from that year. Finally, Butler Jung investigated and found out that Judge Lee and his wife had settled in the United States. This lawyer went to the US and through an acquaintance, knew that Judge Lee would be returning to Korea. Because this case was not easy to get retried, everything had to be prepared as thoroughly as possible. Sure enough, Judge Lee quietly returned to Korea. It turned out that his wife was seriously ill that year. To save her, he reluctantly cooperated with the Top organization. But as soon as the case concluded, he resigned and moved his family to the United States. Furthermore, the case file from that year was handed over to Yoon-do. Judge Lee hoped that Yoon-do could soon uncover the truth of the case. After studying the file, Yoon-do discovered that So-Ki's mother died at 4 p.m. Yoon-do recalled that on that day, his mother had been asked to return to work early. Therefore, she didn't have time to cook and could only go to the convenience store to buy some instant noodles for Yoon-do. From the time the receipt was issued, the time she returned to the mansion could be inferred, and it coincided with the time So-Ki's mother was murdered. If this is true, then Yoon-do's mother still cannot escape suspicion. Meanwhile, Chairman Mo still cannot accept that his son is gay. Therefore, Chairman Mo wants to support his eldest son to become the heir to the corporation. Unexpectedly, Chairman Mo faced strong opposition from Mrs. Han. Mrs. Han argued that Won-soo was a free spirit and art lover, making him fundamentally unsuitable to manage the corporation. A heated argument ensued between the two due to their differing opinions. Mrs. Han returned to Top's office to seek everyone's opinion on Chairman Mo's choice of his eldest son as heir. Surprisingly, everyone agreed with the plan. At that moment, moment, Won-soo entered, presenting Mrs. Han with a large bouquet of flowers, hoping to gain her support. However, Mrs. Han coldly declared that she would not bet on Won-soo. Meanwhile, Yoon-do and So-ki were still discussing how to overthrow Mrs. Han. Finally, So-ki approached the prosecutor, hoping for his help. However, the prosecutor seemed to disdain So-ki. Without further ado, So-ki presented evidence of the prosecutor's corruption. Threatened and frightened, he reported to Mrs. Han. Hearing this, Mrs. Han felt helpless with this weak man. However, thanks to this, Mrs. Han discovered So-ki's ultimate goal, the case from 15 years ago. Because Mrs. Han had cleaned up all traces from that year, she couldn't understand where So-ki had found the clue. At the same time, Top discovered that Judge Lee had secretly returned to the country. Furthermore, they found out that Yoon-do and So-ki had gone to a nightclub together. But they didn't go there to have fun. They borrowed a VIP room to hold a meeting. They also discovered a clue about the nanny from that year. After connecting these clues, Mrs. Han deduced that Yoon-do was the son of the nanny from that year. That's why Yoon-do cooperated with So-ki to investigate the case from 15 years ago. Miss Han immediately instructed her subordinates to respond urgently. At the same time, she summoned Yoon-do to her private office for a confrontation. Upon meeting Yoon-do, Min Han directly addressed the issue. She knew about their plan, but there was a legal problem. Yoon-do was not the nanny's biological son, so he had no right to file for retrial. However, Yoon-do replied that although he couldn't use his status as a son, he could file as a lawyer. Miss Han quickly fabricated evidence of Yoon-do's embezzlement and sent people to arrest him. So-ki and Yoon-do's investigation, which had just begun to make progress, was obstructed by Miss Han. Furthermore, Miss Han used her power to send Yoon-do's police friend to the Ministry of Transportation. Not stopping there, Miss Han also ordered her subordinates to vandalize journalist Kim's office. Upon receiving this news, So-ki immediately drove to meet Miss Han. At this point, Mrs. Han seized the opportunity to demand that So-ki stop trying to retry the case. Only then would Yoon-do be released from prison. However, So-ki was not easily swayed. So-ki and Yoon-do were determined to see this through to the end. Moreover, So-ki was determined to find a way to get Yoon-do out of prison. Although So-ki's resolve was firm, Mrs. Han was not easily swayed. She then continued to pressure them. Even Yoon-do's father's shop was not spared. Under the pretext of searching for evidence, they ransacked his shop. Even worse, they pushed Yoon-do's father to the ground. Finally, Miss Han personally went to see Yoon-do's father. She said that if he could persuade his son to withdraw his request for a retrial, his son could return home safely. Otherwise, she would cause Yoon-do to lose his lawyer's license and become a person with a criminal record. However, Yoon-do's father flatly refused. He supported his son in speaking up for justice. Miss Han sneered and sarcastically remarked that for some people, losing is their life. Yoon-do's father, hearing this, angrily threw water at the woman. When So-ki arrived, Yoon-do's father tearfully begged her to find a way to save his son. Hearing this, So-ki affirmed that she would definitely save Yoon-do. Unexpectedly, when So-ki went to see Yoon-do, she ran into an acquaintance. The prosecutor presiding over Yoon-do's trial was the same prosecutor she had been on a blind date with. Afterwards, So-ki told Yoon-do about Miss Han's offer, but Yoon-do disagreed because this was the opportunity they had worked so hard to obtain. However, they now only have 48 hours before Yoon-do is transferred to the detention cell. If Yoon-do doesn't compromise, So-ki can only try her best. While So-ki was thinking of a way to rescue Yoon-do, she coincidentally met journalist Kim and his secretary. They both emphasized not giving up and searching for evidence. So-ki had previously knew that the murderer of her grandfather was that wicked woman. She quickly found the person who managed her grandfather's meals that day. It turned out that Mrs. Han had sent almond sauce to So-ki's grandfather. This was the indirect cause of his death. So-ki wanted to use this opportunity to use both old and new evidence to overthrow Mrs. Han. Since the incident involving So-ki's mother, the surveillance video had been stolen. The evidence was that the prosecutor had lost important documents. Meanwhile, journalist Kim and police officer Oh found the police officer responsible for the case that year. The officer had provided surveillance video to the prosecutor, but the prosecutor had deleted the evidence. This crime could carry a sentence of up to 5 years in prison. Afterward, So-ki met with Won-soo. Clearly, for Won-soo, the biggest obstacle to inheriting the MC group was Mrs. Han. For this reason, So-ki wanted the two to cooperate. Although somewhat hesitant, Won-soo was cautious and didn't rush to agree to So-ki's proposal. Instead, Won-soo decided to sound out Mrs. Han's opinion first. Unexpectedly, Mrs. Han said that Won-soo should continue as a director. At this point, Won-soo was certain that he wouldn't have Miss Han's support for inheriting the group, so he accepted So-ki's proposal. Recently, Chairman Mo and Miss Han have frequently disagreed on the issue of succession, so Won-soo also sounded out her father's opinion of Miss Han. Won-soo told her father that the MC group is now effectively under Miss Han's control, and hinted that the position should be replaced. These words touched a sensitive spot for her father. Since taking over as chairman, he has always been wary of Miss Han. While he is the chairman, the real power lies with Miss Han. Therefore, Chairman Mo remained silent, implicitly agreeing with Won-soo. Won-soo recounted all these reactions in detail to So-ki, so So-ki no longer needed to worry about her father protecting that wicked woman. Afterwards, So-ki arranged a meeting with Judge Lee. So-ki expressed her wish for Judge Lee to help her get Miss Han imprisoned. If Judge Lee doesn't support her, So-ki will destroy the evidence from that year's case. But if the plan succeeds, So-ki will help Judge Lee become the chief judge. So-ki also shared that Chairman Mo and Miss Han have a very complicated relationship related to inheritance issues. If the judge wants to have a close relationship with Chairman Mo, the only way say is for him to eliminate Miss Han and cooperate with her. However, Judge Lee believes that relying solely on their power would make it difficult to convict Miss Han. Therefore, So-ki added that she also possesses other important evidence. Her grandfather's catering manager provided testimony, and So-ki also has a recording of Miss Han admitting to plotting against So-ki's grandfather. In addition, there is the testimony of Won-soo. Won-soo stated that Miss Han instructed him to lie to the public about being the biological father of actress Nari's son. All of this is certainly enough to convict Miss Han. After much deliberation, Judge Lee finally decided to follow So-ki's plan. Judge Lee visited Chairman Mo to gauge his reaction. Judge Lee indicated that he would arrest Miss Han, but Chairman Mo didn't seem very interested. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Ju questioned Yoon-do. Yoon-do presented arguments and evidence proving his innocence. Furthermore, Yoon-do taunted Prosecutor Ju and his father, implying they were merely tools for Top to exploit. The prosecutor, having been hit where it hurt, couldn't argue back and left in frustration. Judge Lee summoned him to his private office. Judge Lee instructed Prosecutor Gore, go to release Yoon-do so they could focus their efforts on dealing with Miss Han. Thanks to So-ki's efforts, Yoon-do was finally released. As soon as Yoon-do went outside, he saw So-ki waiting. So, Yoon-do excitedly approached and kissed So-ki on the lips. This unexpected kiss made both of them feel a little awkward. Not long after, the police arrested Mrs. Han. Next, So-ki and Yoon-do met with Judge Lee. The judge expressed that he would quickly arrange for Yoon-do's mother's release from prison. However, Yoon-do said that his mother was a very honorable person and would not agree to be released without being exonerated. Judge Lee listened and understood the situation, but he advised them to abandon the idea. However, the two still secretly filed an application for a retrial of the case from that year. At the same time, Chairman Mo summoned the leader of Top to his office. Chairman Mo expressed his desire to relinquish some functions in the executive board in exchange for stability for the corporation. At the same time, Chairman Mo also hinted that he would let the other party take over Top in place of Mrs. Han. However, Top's employees were all loyal to Miss Han, so he remained unwavering and even tried to save her. Later, the team leader went to the prison to see Miss Han. Miss Han ordered her subordinates to immediately bring someone to assist with the retrial to the United States and informed Judge Lee that So-ki's group had filed a request for a retrial of the old case. The judge did not want his crimes from that year exposed, so he could only continue to cooperate with Miss Han. Thus, Miss Han's release was only a matter of time. This made So-ki and Yoon-do's plan much more difficult, because Judge Lee changed his mind. If they filed a retrial request, it would be difficult for it to be approved. But they couldn't give up and had no choice but to fight to the end. Yoon-do, as the lawyer representing his mother, filed a request for a retrial of the case. After a long time, news of the old case once again attracted public attention. Everyone in the MC group was stunned upon receiving this news. Mrs. Mo and an art gallery employee met. Mrs. Mo gave the other party a valuable gift, hoping they would help her cover up what happened at the exhibition. This scene was inadvertently witnessed by her second son. Won-jun felt strange seeing his mother act this way, wondering if she was hiding something. At this time, Chairman Mo was talking to Mrs. Han. Mrs. Han asserted that she would find a way to remove the retrial application. Chairman Mo only asked if Mrs. Han still wanted Won-jun to become the heir. Mrs. Han confirmed that she did, and therefore decided to eliminate Prosecutor Ju. A series of incriminating evidence against Prosecutor Ju was presented, quickly sparking public discussion. Under pressure from public opinion, the prosecutor resigned to take over the investigation. It seems Prosecutor Ju had prepared for this situation. However, Miss Han's influence was truly formidable. Miss Han continued to order her subordinates to expose the wrongdoings of Prosecutor Ju's son. Not wanting to affect her son, Prosecutor Ju chose to end his own life. Won-soo once again sought support from Mrs. Han, but unfortunately, Mrs. Han remained steadfast in her initial choice. Won-soo revealed that 30 years ago, her grandfather had an illegitimate child, and because of this, her grandmother fell into depression and committed a rash act. The illegitimate child then disappeared without a trace. Won-soo believed that Mrs. Han was responsible for handling this matter. Upon receiving this information, Mrs. Han immediately connected it to the fact that her grandfather had always loved his granddaughter, So-ki. Furthermore, both her grandfather's name and So-ki's name contained the character he. Clearly, something was amiss. Mrs. Han immediately tracked down the former housekeeper. As expected, So-ki was indeed her grandfather's daughter. After discovering the truth, Mrs. Han took the DNA test report to Chairman Mo, where she revealed the truth. Chairman Mo's daughter was actually his younger sister. Chairman Mo was so shocked by the news that he suffered a brain hemorrhage and fainted, making the situation even more chaotic. So-ki suspected that Mrs. Han was behind the incident and that her goal was for Won-jun to inherit the corporation. Without Chairman Mo's interference, Won-jun's inheritance would face no obstacles. Since Prosecutor Ju was forced to his death by Mrs. Han, her son had been waiting for an opportunity for revenge. He decided to cooperate with So-ki's group to overthrow her. Together, they gathered evidence of her crimes to send Mrs. Han to prison. To show their sincerity, Woo-sung gave them the case file of Yoon-do's mother. When Yoon-do looked through the file, the truth was revealed. It turned out that So-ki's mother died between 1 to 2 p.m. At this time, Yoon-do was with his mother, giving her a perfect alibi. However, there was a significant discrepancy between the actual time and the time recorded in the surveillance video. They discovered that Chairman Mo and Mrs. Han both arrived after So-ki's mother died, thus ruling out suspicion against them. The only remaining suspects were Mrs. Mo and her 2 sons. After much speculation, they concluded that all 3 suspects seemed connected to So-ki's mother's death, making identification of the culprit extremely extremely difficult. So-ki and Yoon-do found Soo-jin. Soo-jin's life after the divorce was peaceful and happy. She still wore the necklace So-ki had given her. In fact, inside the necklace was a memory card containing evidence that Mrs. Han had sent someone to seduce and entice Soo-jin into an affair. So-ki wanted this person to testify. Mrs. Han still believed everything was going according to plan. However, she didn't anticipate the housekeeper coming to find So-ki. The housekeeper revealed that So-ki was her grandfather's biological daughter, while her deceased mother wasn't her biological mother. At this moment, So-ki found it hard to accept. She ran away, sobbing uncontrollably. Seeing So-ki like this, Yoon-do could only comfort her. But So-ki wasn't a weak woman. Soon, she overcame the shock. She decided to use this opportunity to apply for a redistribution of MC Group shares. This action cleverly hindered Won-jun from inheriting the chairmanship. So-ki confronted Mrs. Han about this. She suspected that Mrs. Han had told Chairman Mo this information, causing him to be shocked and suddenly suffer a brain hemorrhage. Mrs. Han frankly admitted and even loudly declared that she did everything for the MC Group. She also advised So-ki to live up to her responsibilities. However, So-ki showed that she would destroy all of Mrs. Han's plans. So-ki returned home and revealed her true identity, astonishing everyone. So-ki's status immediately rose. Her stepmother, finding herself having to change her way of addressing her, was unacceptable. Her two older brothers now became So-ki's nephews. Afterward, the whole family went to Mrs. Han to verify whether what So-ki said was true. The answer surprised them all. So-ki was indeed the daughter of their grandfather. Chairman Mo was being treated at the hospital, but the family didn't seem to be grieving. Mrs. Mo and her second son were only focused on finding a way to inherit the family fortune. Won-jun worried that So-ki's identity would affect the distribution of the corporation's shares. However, Mrs. Han reassured Won-jun that she didn't need to worry, as she had destroyed the documents, proving So-ki's identity. To avoid unnecessary trouble, Mrs. Han quickly arranged for Won-jun to inherit the company. However, Won-soo stubbornly sought out Mrs. Han, hoping to receive her support once again. But as always, Won-soo was rejected. Mrs. Han bluntly stated that Won-soo was completely unsuitable to be the CEO of MC, as he had previously murdered someone. It turned out that Mrs. Han had known all along that Won-soo was the murderer of So-ki's mother. Everything stemmed from the mother's favoritism towards her two sons. In the Mo family, the younger brother was the favored child, while the older brother never received any attention or recognition from his mother. Won-soo even frequently endured ridicule and unfair treatment from his mother. Therefore, Won-soo had always hoped to receive recognition from his family, especially his mother. Won-soo knew that his mother was suffering because of So-ki's mother, so Won-soo decided to go to So-ki's mother to persuade her to agree to a divorce. Unexpectedly, the whole family came to see her that day. First was the second son, Won-jun. Won-jun came to beg So-ki's mother to help him hide his cross-dressing. So-ki's mother was a beautiful and kind woman. She promised to help Won-jun keep the secret and even blessed him. Then, her husband's mistress, the current Mrs. Mo, came to see her. She not only provoked but also mocked So-ki's mother, saying that her husband had abandoned her. She even asserted that the two would soon divorce. So-ki's mother was not a weak person, so the two had a fierce argument. In the end, So-ki's mother sat alone in a bad mood. She scribbled on the painting to vent her anger. However, not long after, Won-soo arrived, bringing a bottle of red wine and a book. Won-soo begged So-ki's mother to divorce his father. So-ki's mother, finding the trouble unbearable, flatly refused Won-soo. As Won-soo was about to leave, he overheard So-ki's mother saying to the painting that it was a worthless piece of art. Remembering his own mother had said the same thing to him, Won-soo became angry, believing So-ki's mother was mocking him. In a moment of rage, Won-soo attacked her. After calming down, Won-soo realized he had unintentionally killed someone, so he panicked and fled the scene. Shortly afterward, Chairman Mo arrived and discovered his wife dead. Looking at the evidence at the scene, Chairman Mo suspected the murderer was a family member. Therefore, Chairman Mo called Mrs. Han to handle the crime scene. Back in the present, So-ki still hasn't found the main suspect in that year's case, so she decides to return home to investigate further. So-ki decides to go to Mrs. Mo first. So-ki questions Mrs. Mo about why there was a bottle of red wine at the crime scene, especially since it was Mrs. Mo's favorite wine. Mrs. Mo insists that she only drinks with people she loves and would absolutely never drink with someone she hates. Moreover, she couldn't possibly get involved in a murder case because of someone she hates. After that, So-ki goes to the second young master, Won-jun. Won-jun says that So-ki's mother didn't exploit his weaknesses to attack him, so he has no reason to kill her. So-ki finds both their explanations very reasonable, so she decides to continue investigating young master Won-soo. So-ki questioned Won-soo about why he went looking for his mother on the day of the crime, but Won-soo gave a very vague explanation. Won-soo then half-jokingly told So-ki that he was the culprit. It seemed Won-soo was aware that So-ki suspected him, so he planned to confess his guilt. However, this required great courage, so he arranged to meet Yoon-do for drinks. Won-soo continued to half-jokingly admit he was the murderer, which made Yoon-do somewhat suspicious. Soon after, the MC Group's shareholders meeting proceeded as scheduled. Mrs. Han invited all the prominent figures in the business world to attend. This time, Mrs. Han wanted to introduce the new successor to the group. Everyone gathered, and everything seemed to be under Mrs. Han's control. But at that crucial moment, the meeting room door suddenly burst open. So-ki and Yoon-do strode in, followed by a group led by Milk Witch, the woman who had once caused a stir in the Korean financial world with a single investment decision. Milk Witch's appearance silenced the entire room. No one suspected that their grandfather had planned everything while he he was alive. He left behind a copy of the paternity test results between him and Sok-hee, which he then entrusted to his trusted friend, Milkwitch. Thanks to that document, Sok-hee was immediately legally recognized as the legitimate heir to the corporation. Everyone was even more stunned when Milkwitch announced she was transferring all her shares to Sok-hee. From someone who had been sidelined from power, Sok-hee suddenly became the largest shareholder. The situation changed in the blink of an eye. The decision to appoint Won-jun as chairman was immediately cancelled. Mrs. Han could no longer maintain her usual proud demeanor. However, Mrs. Han's survival instincts quickly kicked in. Unwilling to accept defeat, she began buying shares from small shareholders. She wanted to regain control of the company. But So-hee and Yoon-do anticipated this move, so they secretly collaborated with the prosecutor to investigate the illegal activities of the Mo family. A few days later, shocking news broke. Mrs. Mo was arrested for fraud and copyright infringement. She was also prosecuted for illegal transactions and abuse of power. The once glorious MC group finally collapsed. So-hee and Yoon-do sought out Won-soo, hoping to hear the truth about the case from years ago. Won-soo didn't resist. He calmly informed them that he had handed over the evidence to the prosecutor. The evidence Won-soo referred to was a video confession. In that video, Won-soo confessed to all his crimes. He said that he had wanted to confront Sok-hee directly, but ultimately lacked the courage. The video ended with a choked sigh. Not long after, the police officially issued an arrest warrant for Won-soo. The next morning, Sok-hee stood silently looking through the glass window. From now on, Sok-hee could control her own destiny. When the police raided Won-soo's villa, the melodious music still echoed throughout the room. The scent of red wine lingered in the air, and the yellow light illuminated the calm face of the man sitting at the wooden table. But when they approached, the scene before them shocked everyone. Won-soo had quietly chosen to end his own life. Sok-hee stood motionless for a long time, her mind blank. That man had once destroyed her mother, and he had plunged her childhood into the darkness of suffering and hatred. But now that he was gone, she felt both relief and emptiness. After all, Won-soo was still her blood relative. With the case closed, the prosecutor quickly requested a search warrant for the top group. This news sent shockwaves through the financial world. Yet, Mrs. Han remained calm. The game was nearing its end, but Mrs. Han wasn't easily defeated. It turned out that she had prepared an escape route from the beginning. She had hidden the evidence damaging to her. When the prosecutor began the trial, Mrs. Han used that very evidence to secure the fate of the group. Soon after, the agreement was reached. The prosecutor agreed to hold Mrs. Han was entirely responsible for the illegal activities, with the MC group being excluded. The MC group was where Mrs. Han had poured her heart and soul into building it, and it was also where she lost herself. Even in her final moments, Mrs. Han remained absolutely loyal to the group. The trial took place, and Mrs. Han was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The murder of the madam, 15 years ago, was finally solved. Yoon-do's mother wept emotionally in her son's arms upon hearing the verdict. On the other side, Mrs. Mo and her son were sentenced. The MC group quickly entered a new era. Unsurprisingly, Sok-hee became the official heir, and the top organization was handed over to Yoon-do. Immediately after taking power, Yoon-do disbanded the entire old team. Then, Yoon-do recruited new personnel and announced the re-establishment of Top under a different form. In the first meeting, Yoon-do recounted the organization's dark history to the new members. Yoon-do affirmed that from now on, Top would never commit any illegal acts again. Sok-hee walked away, her eyes no longer filled with the resentment they once held. Instead, she carried the belief that justice had finally been served. Before leaving this world, Won-soo had secretly left 2 final gifts for his mother and younger brother. When things gradually calmed down, Sok-hee returned those gifts to them. The gift for Won-jun was the brooch that had been lost years ago. It turned out that Won-soo had known for a long time that Won-jun belonged to the LGBT community. The gift for his mother was a painting Won-soo had drawn as a child. In the painting was the image of his gentle and kind mother, the role model he had always longed for. Many years ago, Won-soo intended to give that painting to his mother, but at that time, his mother was grieving the loss of her youngest son. In her despair, she uttered words that broke Won-soo's heart. From that moment, Won-soo understood that he was worthless to his mother. In a family full of ambition and scheming, perhaps the eldest son was the most virtuous. He chose silence and retreated into his own cinematic world. He used the lens to tell stories instead of expressing his unspoken emotions. He never craved power or money, for all he wanted was a little affection from his cold mother. When all the tragedy ended, Sok-hee held a small party at home and invited everyone to thank and say goodbye. Because she decided to study abroad and learn more about law, she handed over the MC group to a professional team. Now she chose a peaceful life. Time passed quickly. A few years later, Yoon-do kept his promise to continue working as a lawyer defending justice. One day, Yoon-do received news that someone was being detained at the police station, and that person requested his services as their lawyer. Without hesitation, Yoon-do immediately ran there. But when the interrogation room door opened, Yoon-do was surprised to see Sok-hee waiting for him. She had finished her studies and returned to the country. After many years, the two met again, but the feeling of distance was not at all. Finally, the two happily held hands and shared a warm kiss in the middle of the street. Elsewhere, those who had been convicted had also completed their sentences one by one. Mrs. Han had been released. As Mrs. Han walked out of the prison gate, the former members of Top were waiting and bowed. The luxury car rolled away into the sunset. No one knew where they were going, but in Mrs. Han's eyes, there was still a coldness and calculation. The drama ends here. Thank you for your interest and for watching. Goodbye and see you again.